So James, the third thing you talked about at that agronomy evening was mid-sized communities. So perhaps again you can just explain what that was about.
So I think thinking about our long-term trajectory, the short-term implications, thinking about strengthening our clergy resources to enable us to move forward, I think the mid-sized communities thing really is about how this affects each of us. And when we talk about the kingdom and more of God's Spirit in terms of stepping into who we're meant to be, seeing what happened around Jesus happening around our lives and around our churches, I think I'm very aware that we come from different places and different levels of spiritual confidence in these things. And for me, what the Mid-Sized Communities initiative is about is creating a space where we can build spiritual confidence in this vision to see that God's kingdom come, and really to begin with what that looks like for each of us as individuals. And so practically, when I talk about mid-sized communities, I'm talking about kind of groups of 20, 25, maybe even 30, meeting in someone's home who has a large enough kitchen or living room to pack in, and beginning to be a context where we can begin to grow together in an environment where there's enough people, there's a slight measure of anonymity, so that I can begin to grow in spiritual gifts, grow in understanding, grow in relating to one another on a deeper level, but a bigger space than a small group, where sometimes if you've been journeying together 6, 8, 10 of you for quite a while, sometimes you can know each other too well, or sometimes there's a need in the group which can, is important to get round, but sometimes when all of you are wanting to grow and develop, it's just not always possible. And so what I want to do towards the end of this year into next year, I'm not going to set a time limit on this because I need to gather the right team to invest in this, but I want to develop these groups which can be spaces where people can really grow spiritual confidence and really try the kingdom ministry out in such a way that it can then be a real building block to filter through into all of the things that we're involved with and invested in, and then take that forwards into the groups that we run, our lives that we live, our work that we work, and those sorts of things. So I think in terms of what that looks like, I think it will be in people's homes. They won't be forced on anybody. There'll be optional groups. We'll probably begin with just a few to begin with, so that we can get them going in a really strong way. These are nothing new in that sense. John Wesley had this size of groups where really he wanted to disciple people and to teach them in ways that they could sharpen one another, in ways that they could try out their stuff. And John Wesley called these groups band societies. If you remember back to our church weekend at Dalesdown, Sandy Miller, our speaker who was with us, he kind of made a takeaway remark for us as churches, which was his recommendation that we develop these types of groups that in his language he called pastorates. I've called them mid-sized communities, and I think we need a few months just to develop our own prototype and our own expression of these, which is going to work for our context, our people, and our, where we live. For example, Sandy, I know, had these meetings fortnightly, whereas I think for us, a better rhythm, one that would work for us more appropriately in our context, would probably be monthly. But we just need a bit of time to develop our own prototype and then to set them up in the right way. They will be open to all, but they will be optional, so no one's going to be railroaded into being put in a group or any of those things. But I would imagine there'll be open groups. I hope that they do have a good mix across the churches in the benefice. Okay. but it might be that we have one in Wiston, one in Washington, you know, a couple in Ashington. But you know, if you live in Washington, you want to go to the Ashington one, of course, that's fine. Yeah, that's the sort of vibe behind it.
Okay.
But yeah, I just wanted to bring those across the radar of the churches to say that I think these are going to be key building blocks for growing confidence in these things, the things of the kingdom spiritually, for people to grow and develop. And in essence, you know, I think as we think about how the benefice is developing, in essence, before we begin to quite intentionally look at multiplying services, I do feel that these are going to be key to almost grow a bit smaller in order to grow stronger and ensure that our roots are really firm before we move on into those other things.
Great.